If there's one thing that middle-aged people often say after years of life experience, it's this: trust your instincts. Marcus always thought of himself as rational, not the type to fall for gut feelings or superstitions. But as they turned off the paved road and followed the gravel path that led into the forest of Pine Hollow, a shiver ran down his spine that he couldn't shake. His wife Lena noticed it too, glancing over from the passenger seat, lips tight, brows drawn together. "I thought we were supposed to be escaping stress," she said, half joking. "Yeah," Marcus replied, forcing a chuckle. "Just nature and silence, that's all." But the silence wasn't the peaceful kind. It pressed in on them as the forest grew denser, the tall pines blotting out most of the daylight. The deeper they drove, the more it felt like the trees leaned in, as if watching, whispering. The campground, an old but once popular site named Whisper Creek, had been recently reopened after 2 decades of closure. Why it had shut down to begin with wasn't clear. Something about funding cuts, overgrowth, and old infrastructure. No one mentioned anything darker. They arrived at Site 14, one of the most secluded spots in the park. The fire pit was surrounded by 3 large logs for sitting, and the clearing looked freshly cleaned. A scent of pine needles and old moss filled the air. Lena busied herself setting up their tent while Marcus gathered wood. They'd planned this getaway for weeks. No phones, no laptops, no outside world. Just them and the forest. Yet something about the place felt off. That first night they made a fire and cooked foil-wrapped meals over it. As darkness swallowed the forest, the fire crackled and cast flickering shadows on the trees. That's when they heard it, a sharp, deliberate whistle. 3 quick notes, then silence. Marcus froze, staring into the woods. Lena turned to him. "That wasn't you?" He shook his head slowly. "No, maybe someone from another site." But they hadn't seen a single car or person all day. Not even a ranger. The sound didn't come again, and eventually they chalked it up to a bird or some trick of the wind. They turned in for the night, the unease hanging in the air like mist. The following morning, Lena woke Marcus with a whisper. "Did you hear that last night?" He blinked awake. "What?" "A laugh. Like, right outside the tent. I swear I heard it at least twice." He rubbed his face. "You sure it wasn't a dream?" Lena looked pale. "I'm not." They spent the day hiking nearby trails, trying to shake the feeling. But the further they walked from their site, the more disturbed the forest seemed. Birds didn't chirp, no rustling, no squirrels darting through branches, just the sound of their own steps crunching through leaves. Then they found it, a small handmade wooden charm hanging from a tree branch. It was no bigger than a fist carved with strange symbols. Marcus reached up to take it down, but Lena grabbed his arm. "Don't touch that." He stared at the charm. It swung slightly in the breeze, the way a noose might. That night, they skipped the fire. Something about the charm had unnerved them. They stayed inside the tent, reading by lantern light, trying to pretend they weren't unsettled. Around midnight, Marcus swore he heard footsteps outside, slow, heavy, and circling the tent. He didn't wake Lena. When morning came, he stepped outside. Nothing seemed disturbed until he noticed the footprints. Not boots, not hiking shoes, barefoot, large, wide, and leading in a perfect circle around their tent. Lena came out behind him, saw the prints, and gasped. "We're leaving," she said immediately. But when they packed and tried to leave, The gravel path seemed different, twisted. They drove for what felt like an hour, only to end up back at Site 14. They spent the next few hours trying to find a signal, trying to escape, but the GPS spun endlessly, and the compass app pointed in inconsistent directions. The sun dipped low again. Their second night was pure dread. They heard the whistle again, this time from multiple directions. Something brushed the tent, then a whisper right near Marcus's ear. "Don't go." Lena screamed. Marcus grabbed the flashlight, unzipped the tent, but there was nothing outside. Just trees, still as death. They left the tent behind and tried walking toward the road. After what felt like miles, they found themselves back at the same damn site. "We're stuck," Lena whispered, trembling. On the third day, exhaustion clung to them like wet clothes. Lena stopped eating. Marcus heard voices in the forest, not words, just tones, moaning, chanting. On a tree near their site, someone had carved a symbol, the same as the one on the wooden charm. Only this one looked freshly cut, deep and angry. That night, the fire started on its own. They didn't light it. Something moved beyond the tree line, tall, hunched, watching. Then the laughter came. Unmistakable this time, deep and cruel. The shadows cast by the fire moved differently than they should. They twisted and danced in impossible ways. Marcus held Lena as she cried. "Why us?" she kept asking. "Why this place?" He had no answer. At dawn, the tent was gone. So were their bags. The site looked untouched, as though they'd never been there. Marcus didn't speak much anymore. His eyes were sunken. Lena wrote a note on a piece of cardboard they found in the woods. "If you find this, don't stay. Don't listen to the voices." They tried again to leave, walking this time. Hours passed. No roads, just trees. Marcus began mumbling to himself, words that weren't his. Lena shook him, trying to bring him back, but he only stared at her, expressionless. That night, she woke to find Marcus gone. His boots were still there, just gone. Lena was found days later by a search party. She was barefoot, covered in cuts and dirt, eyes wide and distant. She never spoke again, not a single word. She now lives in a psychiatric facility in Oregon. The note she left was recovered, but Site 14 was never found again. The park was quietly shut down once more. No official explanation. Some say the forest has rules, ancient ones, and when outsiders trespass without respect, they're swallowed whole. Others believe it's something older, something watching from the pines, waiting for the right kind of mind to feed on. To this day, nobody knows what happened to Marcus. Some hikers claim they hear a whistle at night, 3 short notes, followed by silence. In 2018, a young ranger named Elise was assigned to investigate old park closures for a new tourism project. She stumbled across a weathered map in the archives that marks Site 14, though it didn't exist on any GPS system or recent chart. Against advice, she ventured into Pine Hollow with a body camera and a satellite phone. The camera footage was found weeks later, buried under a pile of rocks by the riverbank. Elise was never located. In the footage, her voice grew increasingly panicked as she walked in circles, trying to leave. One frame showed a man standing behind a tree, just barely visible. He wore no shoes. His eyes reflected the flashlight like a wild animal's. He whispered, "Stay." Since then, Campers have reported strange dreams if they pitch a tent near the old Pine Hollow entrance. Dreams of being watched, of trees shifting positions, of hearing footsteps, but only when they close their eyes. One group of teenagers claimed they heard someone crying for help, but when they followed the sound, they found an empty tent and a campfire burning blue. The authorities sealed off the forest permanently last year, or so they claimed. Still, every so often, a hiker vanishes, and always, someone nearby hears it. 3 short whistles, then laughter. It started with an unexpected email. Kevin, a 43-year-old accountant from Portland, had just settled into his Friday evening ritual. A cold beer, a reclined chair, and some mindless reality show playing in the background. He hadn't spoken to his college friends in years, let alone thought about them. But there it was, an email titled Camp Echo Reunion, 1 weekend only. The message was simple and oddly nostalgic. It was from Jonah, the group's once charismatic leader, and had invited Kevin to a reunion at Camp Echo, the place they all visited back in 1999. Kevin's heart skipped. Camp Echo wasn't just any campground. It was the site of their last trip together before everyone went their separate ways. Something about it had always lingered in his memory, though not in a pleasant way. He didn't talk about what happened that weekend in '99. None of them did. Still, curiosity overpowered hesitation. The invitation promised a weekend of beer, bonfires, and reliving youth. What could go wrong? The drive to the campgrounds was uneventful, yet Kevin couldn't shake a creeping sense of unease. His GPS signal dropped an hour before reaching the site, forcing him to rely on vague directions scribbled on the back of a gas station receipt. When he finally arrived, twilight was creeping through the trees. The camp looked almost the same, aged sure, but eerily preserved. He was the last to arrive. Jonah, Mike, Rachel, and Tina were already gathered around a freshly lit fire, drinks in hand, laughing like no time had passed. For a brief moment, Kevin felt 22 again. They exchanged hugs and clapped backs, but something felt off. Jonah looked thinner, more rigid. Rachel's laugh had a forced sharpness. Mike kept checking the trees. Tina didn't say much at all, but Kevin pushed it aside. Maybe it was just age. After dinner and a few drinks, the group started talking about their last night at Camp Echo in '99. It didn't take long before someone, Jonah, brought up Cabin 6. Kevin's stomach tightened. That cabin had always been avoided, even by the camp staff back in the day. They all remembered the warning. Don't go near Cabin 6 after dark. Jonah claimed he had the keys now. The camp was closed to the public, so they could explore all they wanted. He suggested they do what they were too afraid to do back then, go inside. Kevin immediately protested, but the others were already on their feet. Their footsteps crunched against the dry pine needles as they made their way to the far edge of the campgrounds. Cabin 6 stood in the trees like a forgotten coffin, windows dusty and dark. The moment they opened the door, the air shifted. It wasn't just cold, it was heavy, as if the room itself exhaled something ancient. Dust particles danced in their flashlight beams. The walls were scratched, not with words, but frantic, chaotic lines, as though someone had tried to claw their way out. Tina gasped when they found a torn sleeping bag and rusted lantern in one corner. "This wasn't here before," she whispered. Kevin turned toward the fireplace and froze. His flashlight illuminated what looked like a name carved deep into the wood. Elliot. None of them knew an Elliot. "Who's that?" Mike asked, but no one answered. A sudden noise, a faint knocking sound came from the small attic above. Everyone turned in unison. Against all better judgment, Jonah pulled the attic string. The hatch creaked open with a groan so long it felt like a scream. Kevin's pulse raced. "Let's just go," he insisted, but Jonah already had his head and shoulders inside. "It's empty," he said. That's when they heard the scratching. It was fast, like fingernails dragging across drywall, circling them from the inside of the cabin walls. Tina began sobbing. "This isn't funny, Jonah." But Jonah had gone pale. "I didn't do anything." Kevin saw it next. A shape moving behind the stained glass window. It wasn't a shadow. Shadows don't breathe. They bolted from cabin 6. But the woods didn't feel the same anymore. Paths they once knew twisted in unfamiliar ways. The camp map posted near the entrance looked distorted. Landmarks were missing. Jonah muttered, "No, this isn't how it was." The trees echoed with whispers, not loud, but consistent, like dozens of mouths murmuring just out of comprehension. Mike suggested they split up to search for the main road. "You've seen horror movies, right?" Kevin shot back. "That's how people die." But they were already scattered. Kevin and Tina stuck together, walking in a wide arc back toward the lake. The lake was glassy, reflecting nothing. Not the moon, not the trees. Just a void. Tina stared into it and murmured, "They said someone drowned here." Kevin glanced over. "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't remember, but it was a boy." Her eyes welled with tears. "Wait, Kevin, Elliot." It hit him like a hammer. Elliot, the counselor's kid. He disappeared in May 99. No body was found, no investigation, just silence. Kevin remembered flashes, someone screaming, a splash, Jonah yelling for them to keep quiet or the camp would shut down. "We left him," Kevin muttered, voice cracking. "We left him there." The whispers intensified. They returned to the fire pit, hoping the others would regroup. Only Mike was there, but he was sitting in the dirt, rocking back and forth. "He followed me," he whispered. He knows what we did." Suddenly, Rachel came stumbling into the clearing. Her clothes were torn, her face pale. "It's in the trees," she choked. "It's him. He wants us to remember." Behind her, the trees rustled though there was no wind. A figure stood beyond the shadows, not a child, not quite a man. Its face was blank, and its hand was dripping. They threw what remained of the firewood into the pit and lit it, forming a final circle. "He's trapped us here," Jonah admitted. "The camp, it's not real anymore. It's a memory twisted by guilt." One by one, they confessed. What happened to Elliot, their silence, the deal Jonah made with the camp manager to hide the death. With every word, the figure stepped closer. Kevin felt heat in his chest, not from the fire, but from shame. The fire flared not upward, but outward like a pulse of light. Kevin woke up alone at the fire pit. The sun was rising. No Jonah, no Rachel, no Mike, no Tina. Just ash. Cabin 6 was gone. The trees no longer whispered. Staggering to his car, he found it sitting in the same spot he arrived. No damage, full signal. As he drove away, Kevin looked into the rearview mirror. A small shape stood at the edge of the trees. A boy, dripping wet, smiling faintly. It started with a message in a group chat none of them had used in years. "One last camp, like the old times," typed Greg, their college buddy who always had a taste for nostalgia and fire pits. Out of the 8 friends who once shared endless weekends around tents and beer coolers, only 4 replied: Michael, Dean, Carla, and Jenna. Middle-aged now, with mortgages, kids, and thinning patience, they were reluctant. But something about that message, its simplicity, its warmth, sparked a curiosity they hadn't felt in years. The location was Black Hollow Pines, a remote stretch of forest 2 hours from town. Greg claimed it was untouched, quiet, perfect for disconnecting. None of them had heard of it before, but they shrugged it off. The thought of escaping ringing phones and relentless emails was tempting. Even Dean, the most skeptical, eventually agreed. They packed light, expecting just another weekend of storytelling and s'mores. But what waited beyond the winding dirt path of Black Hollow wasn't nostalgia. It was a nightmare they'd never wake up from. From the moment they turned off the highway and onto the gravel road, something felt off. The forest swallowed the sunlight, even though it was barely late afternoon. The trees were unusually tall, their trunks blackened and too close together, as if trying to hide something. Jenna joked about the Blair Witch, trying to lighten the mood, but even she laughed too quickly, as if desperate for the sound to echo back. They parked near a clearing where Greg had already pitched his tent. He waved enthusiastically, but something about his smile seemed strained, a bit too wide. His eyes flickered to the trees behind them when he thought they weren't looking. Carla, always observant, whispered to Michael, "Does he seem different to you?" Michael nodded subtly, but no one wanted to be the first to ruin the reunion. They unpacked, made a fire, and tried to forget the strange tension in the air. That night, as the fire crackled and the whiskey passed from hand to hand, stories flowed. College memories, embarrassing confessions, ghost tales. Laughter finally loosened the group, but when it was Greg's turn, he hesitated. His eyes darkened. "There's something about this forest," he said, voice low. "I came here once, before, a month ago, just to clear my head, but I wasn't alone." The air around the fire grew still. There were voices whispering my name, and something moved between the trees. Fast, too fast to be human. He looked up. "I should have never brought you here." They laughed at first, thought it was a prank, but Greg didn't smile. And somewhere in the woods, a long, breathy sound echoed like an exhale from something enormous. Everyone went to their tents with unease crawling over their skin. The woods were too quiet. No crickets, no owls. Carla woke first. At 2:13 a.m., her watch glowed faintly. Something was moving around the tents. Soft, slow steps in the pine needles. Not pacing, circling. She held her breath, thinking it was a raccoon or a deer. But when a long shadow passed across the fabric of her tent, tall and narrow like a man, yet impossibly thin, her heart seized. She whispered Michael's name from her tent, but no one answered. Morning came, and Greg was gone. His tent was zipped from the inside, but empty. His gear, his bag, his shoes, everything was still there. No tracks, no notes, just a pile of pine needles where he had slept, arranged in a strange spiral. Dean cursed, pacing the clearing, trying to call out, but there was no cell service. Carla stared at the spiral, This isn't right. This is ritualistic. Jenna looked pale, her hands shaking. He said he wasn't alone here. What if he was serious? Michael tried to ground them. Let's stay calm. We'll look for him. He can't be far. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew something had taken Greg, and it was still watching. They decided to search in pairs. Michael and Carla headed west, Dean and Jenna to the east. Michael tried to joke, tried to keep Carla from spiraling into fear. But the deeper they went, the more the trees started to look identical. The compass on his backpack spun wildly, refusing to settle. Then they heard it. A voice, faint and raspy. Greg's voice, calling Michael's name from the north. Carla grabbed his arm. That's not him. How do you know? Because it sounded like him, but not from him. They turned back, but every tree, every path looked different. As if the forest had moved while they weren't looking. Jenna came back alone. Dean had gone after a sound, said he thought he heard Greg. He never came back. Jenna's hands were scraped and bleeding. It's not just a forest. It's something else. It plays tricks. It wants us. Michael wanted to leave, run down the trail, drive until the trees vanished behind them. But Carla pointed at the path. Look, it's gone. Where the trail should have been was now dense brush. Pine trees packed so tight they formed a wall. The forest had closed its gates. They didn't sleep that night. The fire barely kept lit. Carla saw eyes, dozens, peeking between the trees, glowing pale blue. They never blinked. Jenna began to mutter, repeating Greg's name like a prayer. Michael tried to pull her back, but she walked straight into the woods. The last thing they heard was her voice shifting, splitting into two pitches, one human, one not. Carla screamed. Michael froze, then silence. They found the cabin the next morning, not on any map. Covered in moss, hidden behind a thicket. Inside were symbols, burned into the walls. A journal lay open on the table, pages filled with drawings, figures with no faces, forests with no exits. The last entry read, "It feeds on presence. The more you notice it, the more it sees you. Once it knows your name, it never forgets." Carla collapsed. We need to forget. Stop thinking about it, just walk. Don't speak its name. But the forest whispered Michael's name again. Carla didn't make it. She vanished behind him in broad daylight. No scream, no sound, just gone. Michael stood alone. The trees were closing in. He ran for hours or minutes. Time blurred until somehow the pines began to thin. He stumbled onto the road. A car stopped. A stranger pulled him in. "You came from Black Hollow. My God, no one ever comes back." Michael didn't speak. His eyes stared ahead, empty. But somewhere, deep in the woods, the forest whispered his name again.